is Lisa Chu. I'm a digital journalist at CGTN America, and I was covering the protest on Monday, June 1st, outside the White House, along with two of my colleagues, Dwayne Watkins and Cuba Wools, who are both photographers. Both are incredibly experienced in situations like these. Dwayne had actually covered the riots in Baltimore after the death of Freddie Gray. He was actually attacked by opportunists that were just looking for an excuse to loot, and he was hurt pretty bad. So we knew how important it was to stay safe and have protection and to stay together. We had been covering the protest for several hours, talking to people, taking pictures. It was, in my experience, pretty nonviolent. People were just chanting and holding up signs and shouting. Some people ask me if the protesters, if they ever harassed me or heckled me. I've covered a lot of protests. I was covering a Trump rally and I was heckled by Republicans that were calling me fake news, and I've covered Occupy Wall Street where they were calling me establishment media and heckling me. But in this particular protest, I did not get heckled. I was able to freely shoot whatever I saw. I was walking the streets talking to people. I had just interviewed a mother who had brought her young children.
I want my kids to know that it's important to stand up for Black lives. I want them to know that...
Throughout the day, I'd also seen lots of children protesting with their parents. At one point, I was taking a picture of a young man. He had just graduated from high school. He was in his graduation cap and gown, and he had positioned himself in front of this line of police officers. Little did we know that that line of police officers was there for a reason. They had helmets and face masks and gas masks. While we were walking back towards the protest, we were a little bit further away. We heard these loud bangs and these clouds of smoke coming from the crowd. We were able to get on this sort of higher position. We saw just crowds of people running in every direction. And they were running from police on horseback, mounted police, that were charging at them and yelling at them to move. When I look at the footage later, the mounted police was actually National Park Police. And that was pretty surprising. You just don't imagine National Park Police to display this sort of show of force. And we were really close to the horses. We were scared we might even get trampled by the horses. We thought maybe from where we were standing that the police would continue to let us film because we were media. But no, they were shouting at us to move, to move. And so you're sort of on adrenaline at this point. You're trying to run, but you're also trying to shoot what's behind you. And, you forget things. You forget to tell people what you're seeing. There were also police on the ground that were there yelling at people to move.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
I saw some police officers push a man to the ground and start beating him with batons, and he was able to very quickly get away. At one point when I was running, we passed this alleyway, and I could see people coming from another direction. They were escaping the police, and they were pausing to see if it was safe to get onto the street that I was on, and it was not safe. But as we're running towards that line of police officers that we had previously been photographing, and they were shooting off. It could have been tear gas, it could have been pepper pellets. They were shooting off clouds of smoke, making loud noises. I personally had trouble seeing. I was coughing. It felt like someone had poured pepper water down my throat. Dwayne, he was experiencing tears. He was crying, his eyes, he couldn't see.
Where's Cuba? I know, me too. We gotta find Cuba.
And at that point, we were separated from Cuba, which was really distressing because we made a point to stick together, all three of us, throughout the entire day.
Can you message him?
When I look at the footage later, I see the moment where we were separated. He was photographing a man that had been handcuffed and shoved onto the ground by the National Guard on his stomach. And he was shooting that when a police officer was telling him to move, to move.
Move now. Keep going. Get loose, lethal.
And at one point, another officer pointed an orange gun at him, telling him to move. I think that might have been the first time he'd ever had a gun pointed at him. Reviewing the footage, the officer is shouting, "Move," or "less lethal." And I'm not sure everybody knows that less lethal, what that means, but I mean, it's a rubber bullet gun. And he saw a woman that had been shot by the rubber bullets, and she was bleeding and had cuts all along her legs.
I got recalled for all this.
So one of the reasons that President Trump cites for his reaction was what had happened in D.C. just the night before, on Sunday night. There were acts of vandalism and cars set on fire. Two of my colleagues, Shalu Sun and Ishalaxmi Balingay, were there on Sunday, and it was pretty scary for them. Ishalaxmi shared some of her thoughts on that.
It was really scary to be out there because some people were protesting, some people were peaceful, some people were very agitated and angry. There were times when we were so confused about what to do and what was happening because some of them wanted peaceful protests, some of them are running all around the place, some of them are breaking the floor to grab some stones to throw at the police. So it was a very panicky situation. We stuck together and we were there to just report, bring out the latest and hope the situation doesn't turn too violent than it already is.
Shalu Sun and Ishalaxmi Balingay, they saw a very different scene in the evening on Sunday than I saw on Monday afternoon. President Trump said he wanted to dominate the streets, and he certainly did that. As we were heading back, we saw a police military presence in the city. There were tanks, there was National Guard. And you're running, you're not really processing what you're doing. You're just trying to, get one foot in front of the other to get to a safe position. And you get home and it just feels so unreal to reflect on the fact that this was the federal government doing this. It's just shocking. One thing I won't forget is we had finally were able to get into contact with Cuba, and we had met up and we were walking, all three of us, back to the office. And we saw down one of the main thoroughfares this line of protesters. They had been dispersed and had somehow come back together, and they were marching down the street. And we sort of watched from the distance as they came closer and closer, and then eventually passed us. And all they were shouting was, "Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter." To experience that sort of violent crackdown and then to regroup and still protest, it just shows how much they care about the message that they want people to know.